Testing, 1, 2, 3. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this week's broadcast of the Eureka Conservative from me and my co-star, the very well-known now JJ, the German Shepherd. Always comes over to say hello at the start before getting on his couch. Smarter than any leftist Marxist out there. Does as he's told too, which is good. But he's a beautiful boy. He's always up. He's been so patient this afternoon. I've been pretty much up here doing work in between my live streams and this podcast, which he hates because I ignore him. If you've ever owned a German Shepherd, they're so needy. They are ridiculously needy dogs. They have to be at your feet. This one, he follows me in the toilet, bathroom, wherever I go, he'll follow unless there's a plane overhead. Then he's got to get out the front and bark like crazy at it. He doesn't bark at the moon, but he barks at planes every single time. Even when he's inside and he hears a plane going over, he's got to get outside to bark at it. But I like it. Also barks at people walking past that shouldn't be walking past. And there he goes, up on his couch. So welcome to the Eureka Conservative Podcast from me and JJ. This week I was planning to announce a policy. I'll do that next week. I just have not had time to get into it. I was sick for about 2-3 weeks. I've been over it now for about a week, but I've been getting over all those. Once you've been sick for 2 weeks, you've got to catch up on all your work. And I've been trying to catch up on all my work. I haven't even got on to Twitter as much as I would like. So there's been a few things happening. So I'll focus on them and do what we've done in the past. Go through our Twitter feed, have a bit of look, have a bit of fun, have a bit of commentary. And if you've got something to send through, feel free. We had a great special event last week. The Big J podcast, I call it. See, we had a Burma, an immigrant, a groper, and a Jew. And we all had our different opinions. The whole podcast went for 4 hours. So you're going to need a bit of stamina to watch through it, but I'd encourage you to do it. Get a coffee, maybe play a bit each day. It was just worth it to get the different perspectives from the different people from the different groups. Yeah. And it's not often you get those dynamics together. And the way I like to do my podcast is I like to let everyone speak. Now, we have a little bit of interjection, but I don't want it to be like the Piers Morgan podcast, for example, where everyone's talking over each other. And you got to, and to all the guys' credit, 4 men too, 4 men, no DEI on this podcast. We all did that. We were all respectful. We had a really good discussion and a debate. And it's well worth looking at it, if nothing else, to get an understanding of different demographics. So out of that conversation, I learned a lot off Ben, who was a spokesperson for the Groypers. And I look forward to getting Ben back on. Now, my suspicion is Ben's a groper. He doesn't come out and say it, but you can just see from that discussion he's a groper. He's got to drop the mask and own it. And there's no problem with that. I don't have to. I'm a Christian nationalist, and my Christianity deliberately is put ahead of nationalist. So I have a different view on nationalism than what probably some of the real vigorous nationalists have on it. So I do believe we've got to actually do our best to help as many of our fellow men as we can, whether they're in Australia or whether they're overseas. Now, we can't help everyone. This is an argument we had, for example, with Ben. But we can do our best to do what's right. And we're so far off doing that at the moment as a country. It's crazy. And I feel like a bit of a meat in the sandwich. So I go so far with Ben and his groypers, but I draw a line and I won't cross over it, especially when it contradicts my Christianity, for example. But I'm also so far away from where people are who want to tolerate mass immigration. I want to defend my country, its heritage, and get us back as close to what we were back in the 80s and 90s. here's the bottom line. I don't think, personally, and I hope I'm wrong. I don't think we can ever get back there. No, I think we've gone too far. I think whether we want to or not, whether we want to recognise it or not, mass immigration has had an impact on our society to such a point to get it back to what we had. I think that time's passed. I don't see how we do it without contemplating the uncontemplable. And I certainly don't want to see our country go there. So if you don't know what that is, sorry, I'll let you figure that out. I'm sure enough of you out there know what it is. So how do we go? How do we get our country back to where it was? I'm going to play something in a minute. I played it today on 7 minutes. I think everyone needs to listen to this. It's caused a stir in the States. Everyone talks about AIPAC, which is the Jewish lobby. What no one talks about is the other lobby groups that are out there. It's not just the Jews that lobby politicians. And this is one thing I think that Scott Challen and his lot are onto. They've formed the Australian lobby group, so they're lobbying politicians on Australian issues, which I think is a good thing. Nothing wrong with that. I don't agree with Scott on everything. He doesn't agree with me on everything. But I think we both agree that we need to start lobbying for Indigenous Australians. Now, when I say Indigenous Australians, I'm talking about people that have been born here, their ancestors helped build this country, whether they're black, whether they're white, whether they're actually Aborigine Indigenous or Anglo-European Indigenous. Look up the term and the definition of what the word Indigenous means. I was born in this country. My parents were born in this country. My grandparents immigrated to this country before it was a country. I think I'm as Australian as anybody. I think my brothers and sisters are all Australian as anybody. So, we've got to have a lobby group that lobbies on their behalf. So I think what Scott's doing there is great. But we'll always have slight differences. So like my Christianity once, I do have concerns, and I've talked to Scott. I'm hoping he'll come back on and we'll have another chat about it. I hear what Scott says on remigration. I hear what others say on remigration. And my concern is it's not consistent. I'm really worried about what we're potentially saying, but I don't know enough about it. So again, I'd like to get Scott on and we just chat about remigration. I'd love to get that conversation going. The last one we had a fairly broad conversation. This one I'd like to get it a bit more specific on that policy. And I don't want to go to the griper end that we went through with Ben on that. So I want to be clear. And anyone who follows me, I want them to be able to understand what we're going to be supporting, what we're going to be voting for, and you can only have that through the discussion, right? And I also want Scott and Ben, who are in the younger generations, to understand my concern as a boomer and realise that we're actually not that far apart. We all love our country. We all want its future to be great for our kids. We all can't stand our politicians, and we all have concerns. My bigger concern is definitely about the impact, I'll say it, Islamic immigration. That's my concern. And yeah, I've met some wonderful Muslim people. I've met some wonderful Islamic kids. But we just do need to get some clarity even around that. I've said I'll talk to anyone. I talked to Ben, who represents the Groypers. He's promised me he's going to get a Groyper to discuss, talk with me. I'll talk to them. I'll talk to pretty much anybody who will actually have a decent conversation. So, for example, if I got an Islamic cleric who wants to come on here and have a chat, great. I'd welcome that. I'd love to have a talk to him about a number of things, it'd be a him because it wouldn't be a her, would it? So yeah, I'm happy to talk to anyone, and if they can convince me that overall Islamic immigration would be a good thing, okay. If that can build our culture and our heritage and our future, especially for our kids, and you can convince me of that, okay, all right. I'm not too sure you're going to be able to, but I'm happy to be convinced if you can. Got my big cup of coffee, sorry. I'll be sipping quite a bit of that before it gets cold. I usually talk. It always goes. So I'm going to go straight to this, when I can find it. This thing I put on my daily podcast today. Oh, I've got to find it now. Here we go. And I just want you to listen this for 7 minutes. If you saw it today and you don't want to hear it again, come back in 7 minutes. I'd suggest everyone listens very, very carefully to this, because I think the future of our country is on this. Just listen to what this guy's got to say. Now, I'll give you an introduction. This guy represents the Islamic lobby group in America. Now, his name, if I can get it right one. Oh, no, that's not it. Wrong one. Sorry, give me a tick. Got my glasses on. I'll figure it all out in a minute. Got a couple of things to point out on this one. Oh, my God. Here we go. So his name is Nayad Adwa, and he's in charge of a group called CAIR, CAIR. Now, that's apparently the Islamic or Muslim lobby group in America. So I just want you to have a listen. Now, this goes 7 minutes. I'll come back to it after this in 7 minutes. I want you to have a listen to what he's got to say, and then let's have a discussion about it.
The Muslim community is in a much better place. Are you ready to talk about the future for a couple of minutes? Okay, brothers and sisters, we have 4,000 mosques nationwide. 4,000. That's the largest infrastructure of Muslims in the United States. Many of them are like this. Nicely built by a community that's affluent, but the Muslim community, I have to be honest with you, does not have its priorities straight. And I'll be upfront with you. We spend so much on relief organizations, and we ship our money, hundreds of millions of dollars abroad, and the community here is depleted. I'm not telling you don't send money abroad. I'm saying pay attention to the needs of the Muslim community here. I'm saying save at least 30% of the money that we give relief organizations to be spent on American Muslims, and you will see why. American Muslims send almost $1 billion to the Muslim world. To do what? To deal with the impact of the destructive US foreign policy in the Muslim world. And we are giving them band-aids. We are giving them band-aids, but we are not preventing the crisis that the US is causing to the Muslim world. So if we continue this hemorrhage, we will be depleting our resources. We will not fix it over there, and we will not help the community here either. We are burning the candle on both ends. We can do much better than that, and you will see it will be more effective. And hear me out. 4,000 mosques. I hope that this mosque and the rest of the 4,000 mosques, every year, you will hold another gala, not to raise funds for the mosque, but to raise funds for scholarship. Scholarship for the following. Each mosque should raise funds to give one scholarship for a young Muslim to study law. Another scholarship to study journalism. A third scholarship to study filmmaking. The last scholarship is history and humanities. And you will see why. 4 years from now, if you start next year, 2003, 2004, 24, 25, 26, 27, in 2027, if the Muslim community nationwide does it, what will happen? You will have 4,000 young Muslim attorneys nationwide. You will have 4,000 filmmakers. You will have 4,000 journalists. And you will have 4,000 people who eventually will be professors of history in the United States. If you do it every 4 years, 15 years from now, you will have almost 15,000 Muslim journalists. You will have 15,000 Muslim lawyers. And you will have 15,000 Muslim film professors of history. And when you talk about the image of Islam and developing policy makers and members of Congress and senators and city council members and representatives of our community, not only for ourselves but for the public, then there you go, you have it. You will have a new generation that's prepared, sponsored by the community. And you will say, how can I do that? It's very simple. Outside the mosque, have a new box called Scholarship Fund. And let people give $5 every week. And have a gala. And do one more banquet. The Muslim Achievers Banquet. The Muslim Achievers Banquet. Those who succeed and excel, celebrate them. And let them be the inspiration of the Muslim community and the world. And finally, do not forget about Palestine and Kashmir and the Muslim Uyghurs and Muslims in France. Foreign policy is important for us. Foreign policy, I repeat, foreign policy is a domestic policy. Never be misled that foreign policy is foreign. No, foreign policy is domestic policy. Those who support the state of Israel for so many years unjustly, they need to be counterbalanced by the Muslim community. And you have to consider Palestine on the local agenda in every election and have the Muslim community not give up on the issue of Palestine. If you give up on the issue of Palestine and justice for the Palestinians, you will be betraying the future of Islam in this country, because Palestine is the criteria of strength and weakness of the Muslim community. The BDS movement, it's been fought at all levels, and we are representing the BDS movement in courts, and we are winning. We won against the governor of Texas and the state attorney general in Houston, and we will win against any anti-BDS legislation nationwide, because we have to empower young Muslims, young Americans, and all Americans to have the right to boycott the state of Israel. And this is the least we can do, is the protection of our First Amendment. So I'm just saying this because the issue of Palestine is sometimes scary. Don't be scared, because it is a movement that's shifting, and the public opinion is supporting Palestine, but they need the Muslim community to show up for the Palestinian people. So yes, foreign policy is domestic policy and incorporated. And finally, where are the 527? The political action committees. Create one if you don't have here one in Houston, and put your money for candidates who support you, and hold candidates accountable. Don't just give them money to politicians and don't hold them accountable. They will laugh at you. Tell them, what have you done for me? Why should I give you the $500? What have you done for me? What have you done for my community? You work for me. When I give you money, show up and support our causes. The Muslim community has suffered from the sense of inferiority complex. They give money to politicians and politicians laugh at them. We have to end this culture. You give money to politicians, you hold them accountable, look at their track record. Let young people help you with that. Jazakumullah khair, may Allah bless you. I know that she's coming to continue. Today, the Muslim community is in a much...
All right, guys. So that there to me, that sounds, if I'm being brutally honest, that was presented really well. That's a very smart strategy. But if you look deeply into it, it is a very frightening strategy if you are an Australian nationalist, a Christian nationalist like myself. The way he presented that, if that was at a Christian church, about a school, putting out money, raising funds, getting kids to become doctors, journalists, lawyers. Sorry, he didn't say doctors. What did he say? Lawyers, media people, as in journalists, Hollywood movie directors, politicians, and there was one other. Then he is talking about his faith taking over all those institutions so he can get control And you notice how he talked about our First Amendment. They all came from countries where a First Amendment doesn't exist. But he's talking about our First Amendment. It's not his First Amendment. It's America's First Amendment. Australia doesn't have a First Amendment, which is kind of sad. But they're looking to take over institutions that can propagate their faith. And so they're talking about academics was the other one. So they want media, academics, politicians, lawyers, and Hollywood directors, movie makers. So they control the narrative and they can spread propaganda. And when that happens, they have got the lawyers and the politicians and can put in place their law. I'm about to show you another very interesting video. So they don't shy away from telling you it. You can type in all sorts of things about the Islamic caliphates taking over Western nations, all that. They'll come out and directly say, they know. They know they don't have to fight a war. They don't have to fight a battle. They don't have to shoot a bullet. And they can actually conquest Western nations because our politicians, and us included who vote these bastards in, are too stupid to realise the threat that's right in front of our face. Now, I've got no problem with Muslims coming into this country that assimilate. Now, remember, just last week, Tony Burke said, we don't want people to assimilate. We want them to come over as they are. So what, like the two arseholes that shot 15 people at Bondi? You just want them here as they are? Yeah, they're the people that want Sharia law. You want them as they are? The Muslim men who think it's okay to marry a young girl at 9, you want them coming over as they are and not assimilate into our way of life? Do you want actually men who come over and think women have to be covered from head to toe because they can't control their urges? You want them to stay as they are? I mean, we've got to actually grab the initiative back before it's too late. And that's the next video I'm about to show you. Now, like I said, if this was any other demographic, I'd have not a lot of issues with what he's saying. Because we are a Christian-based country, or at least we were. I think we're just below 50%. It's about 46 or 47% Christian. How many of those Christians are actually into it, which will lead to something later on, into their faith is another thing. Muslim people, which I give them a lot of credit for, are devoted to their faith. Christian people aren't as much. I'm as guilty of this as the next person. Do I go to church every week? No. Do I give to my church each week? Yeah, when I can. Sometimes it's hard because I've got not a dollar in the bank. But normally I'll go to church and I'll give something. But I haven't done that. I've only recently started doing that. As I've found, as you get older, and I think this happens to every Australian, as you get older, you get closer to the end and the beginning, you start getting a bit more serious about your faith. That certainly happened for me. And I regret that now. We're just not as devoted to our faith. We have other things going on in our life. 92,000 people went to the Anzac Day game. No cost of living prices there. And the AFL is still getting great crowds. Australians can be resilient, but for different purposes. Our beach holidays, getting a jet ski, doing it all. And there's nothing wrong with any of this. But we're devoted to the luxurious things in life while ignoring the things that could take that away from us. And that to me is a big concern. And we turn a blind eye to stuff like this. Some people watch that video and will say, good on him. He's trying to get his youth up into these areas and all that, but they're not looking at the reasons for getting their youth into these parts. As he said, and his calculation is wrong, by the way, he's talking every 4 years they will produce 15,000 people in each of those areas. No. So if they get in 4 years' time their first batch of 4,000 in each of those areas, so there was 5, so it's between 16,000, 20,000 people, Islamic people, into those institutions. They will do that year on year on year, not every 4 years. That's just when the first batch comes through. Then the next batch will come the next year. Then the next batch will come the next year. So normally you'd actually say, well, that's a good thing. No. You got to understand the agenda that's going to be coming right behind that thing. You're going to have Sharia law in states, and there's another one I'll show you soon. Well, I won't show you it, but it's about a town in Michigan that's been basically taken over by the Islamic community, and now it's like a little Baghdad in the middle of Michigan. Now, that's a concern. For me, that's a huge concern. That is not people assimilating. That is having exactly what multiculturalism is. Putting one culture here, one culture there, one culture there. But if one culture overwhelms us, we end up becoming what we don't want. And this is where mass immigration is a problem. I don't have a problem with immigration that is balanced, that's going to benefit our country, not disturb our heritage or our culture, and in fact is going to complement it. We've gone away from that in a big, big way these last 25 years. Big way. So there's lots of different theories about how it was. For example, me and Scott Challen had a bit of a debate on X today about Howard's era. All I know is I came to Melbourne in about 2007-8. So that's just as Rudd came into power. Now, I'm going to try not to say I'm racist, but anyone who wanted to paint me as a racist could say what I'm about to say is racist, right? So I'm just going to come out and say it. Couldn't really care. Because I know in my heart of hearts and my soul, I'm not a racist, right? But Melbourne in 2007, 8, 9... Oh, sorry, what am I saying? I can't... Let me change my story entirely. God, I'm getting myself confused. I came to Melbourne in about 1988. Okay, so a long time ago. So that was in the Kane Kerner era. That was still, it was Prime Minister then. I think it was still Hawke. Could have been Keating. I think it was still Hawke. So we had Labor like we have now all over the place. But Melbourne was a totally different city. It was like coming to a big country town. And you could find parts of Melbourne, and I did this. When I first came to Melbourne, I went from suburb to suburb, and I wanted something, because I came from the country in Bensdale and in East Gippsland, and I wanted something that was similar, that I felt comfortable with, that I'd come out from the country. And to me, that was around the East Bentley area, which is in between, just south of Caulfield. And that felt like home. So I settled there. Now, over that period of time, so that's what now, 36 years, the face of that demographic has changed dramatically. That used to be pretty much Anglo-European Christian across the board. You had the Jewish community in Caulfield, and the biggest thing on diversity multiculturalism has been between Dinky Die Aussies, the Jewish community in Caulfield, and you had a bit of the Russian community at that stage coming in. But it was predominantly European. Everyone was predominantly white. You didn't have many Asians, Africans, you didn't have any of that. And this is where the racism will come in, their claims. It was actually a beautiful place to be living in. Melbourne was an amazing city at that time. And you could really, sorry, I'm just trying to make sure my phone's on Do Not Disturb. I don't think it is. So if I'm hanging up, you know why. So it was a really beautiful city. And as time went on, it just changed and changed. We had Ash, that Labor ALP acolyte. That's, I think, his name, Ash. He just comes out with ALP bullshit. And he's bringing up these stats about people arriving in and flying out. I don't need stats. I know what I see in front of my face in the way Australia has changed. You would barely, back in the 90s, you wouldn't cross paths with an Islamic person, a Muslim. You wouldn't. So now you're seeing different nationalities all over Melbourne, and sometimes in areas you never thought. My old part of Melbourne, I now live down in the south east side, basically, because that's where the rental properties take you. Where I live, I lived in Mulgrave for about 4 years, very much Asian dominated, and probably a bit Indian and Sri Lankan. Where I live now, it's more European, but where I work from is more Asian, and where I've done my old thing in Bentley, East Bentley, is very much Asian, Indian, and Sri Lankan. Now, does that give me pause? Yes. Have I Like I do clinics for kids at primary schools predominantly, sometimes at secondary schools. And kids are kids, whether they're Sri Lankans, Indians, Asians, they just love you when you do your clinics and all that sort of stuff. So, you get to be, what's the word? The word I was going to say is tolerant, or maybe accepting, or whatever. You just go with the flow, pretty much. And you get to know people, and I've got to know some wonderful people with Asian background, Indonesian, Vietnamese, Chinese, Sri Lankan, German, you name it, Aussie. I've coached it in my sporting background as a basketball coach. Coached it all. And nearly 100% of those people all want the same things. So that's just a fact. We've changed. But the one group I've always had the difficulty with on, for example, getting parents involved and in doing what we're doing, it's been the Islamic kids. The Islamic kids themselves are great. To get their parents on board to support you, not so much. I've had a couple of Sudanese boys, fantastic boys. They unfortunately their community has allowed a lot of their youth to destroy a lot of their reputation. But the ones I've dealt with have been good. Now, there's obviously arseholes out there too. And the kids I've worked with, whether they've been Islamic kids or Sudanese kids, they've added them. They say, yeah, Bob, they're arseholes. We don't want to go near that. We want to get a job. We want to get a life. We want to get a wife. Do all the right things. The concern, though, is in all those communities, none of those communities are saying, hey, we want to establish, we want, like that guy just said, we want to get 4,000 from 4,000 mosques, we want to have 5 people each year. So that's, think about that, 4,000 times 5, that's 20,000 of our young adults getting into these institutions. So we can just have a factory line of lawyers, journalists, movie producers, politicians, and I forget the other one. They basically want to get into all the institutions that can control the narrative, control the politics, control the laws, and in doing that, they basically take over the country. That's not me saying it. You just heard him. That's them saying it. So there is a lot of our immigration that can be compatible with us as a country. But when you allow so much of it that it changes the face of your country, it changes the future for your country, so young kids now can't afford a house or get a rental or anything like that, then that's where you've got to say, hey, stop. And this is where Scott challenged right. Shut the gate or whatever he said. We need to shut the gate. And I argue we're going to need to shut it for 10 years. We need to have a real pause in this country and say, what's our future with immigration? That immigration intake has got to stop, which leads me to my next point. Very smart man, smarter than me. I got his post up today. Let's see where it is, if I can find it. Here we go. Just bear with me. So have a listen to this, and combine that with what we've just heard. I'll just get it up. Sorry. It's coming. Come on, here we go. Listen to this guy.
This tiny bit of extremists will influence. So eventually, you can imagine that the extremists, because they take more risks, often fail because they take a lot of risks. But every now and then, maybe one gets something right and influences, or one of them gets a job as a mayor, or suddenly one of them is a chief of police. And the history which Republicans have been taught, but I don't think any Democrats, is that this tiny bit of extremists will influence the other people, and then there will eventually be enough of them combined that they will have control over the entire country. Now, if you haven't been taught that this is not just a risk, it's a guarantee. That's where the difference is. If you understand this as a risk, you don't know what's going on. This is not a risk. When you reach about 10% Islamic people in your country, and they've come in recently and they're still very Islamic, you only need a few of them as a percentage. It's still a big number, but as a percentage, just a few of them. You only need a few of them to be the extremists. And that will be a domino effect that goes to first a larger group of people who are not that extreme, and then it continues on until it conquers the country, because that's what they do. Now, it won't be overnight, and it doesn't mean that it applies to any individual. So there's nothing about any Muslim. Believe it or not, I'm not making a comment about any individual, not about any Muslim. It's about the system. The system says, for at least some of them, the extremists, you got to do everything that you can, just everything, in order to become an Islamic nation. So if you have some people who take big risks, they almost always end up in charge. Have you noticed that the people who are the most extreme usually end up in charge? That's not an accident. The more extreme you are, the more you're going to fail, but also if you win, you're going to be in charge. Right? Have you noticed that CEOs of major companies tend to be psychopaths? Like there's a higher ratio of psychopaths where government leaders and CEOs. This is that. The psychopaths tend to do what you need to do to gain power. The regular people would say, well, I'm not going to go that far. I'm not going to kill somebody for power. But the psychopaths might. So over time, the psychopaths always take control. And if you don't want these psychopaths to control the non-psychopaths, who would then be a big enough group to impress their views on the larger country, then you need to decrease the rate immediately.
So, he's arguing there that at 10% of the population, you've got big troubles. So, got on a grok. Let's share that screen. Just did that before I came on. And asks Grok, when will Australia reach that 10% mark? And this is what Grok came up with. So as you can see, around 2050, 26 years, 24 to 27 years from now, depending on exact assumptions about constant rates. Now, I'd say on their birth rate, because they populate and have a lot more kids than what we do, that we might be, that might be an underestimation. I'd say by 2050, I think I'll be well gone. Who knows? That stage, I'll be close to entering, trying to figure this out. Yeah, my 90s. I'm not too sure whether I'm going to be still around by then, but we'll see. But then if we hit, let's say it's 2050, exactly, all right? And we hit 10%, and then you combine it in with what that guy was saying about producing every year 4,000 doctors. Sorry, God, I keep saying doctors. 4,000 lawyers, 4,000 journalists, 4,000 movie producers, 4,000 politicians, and there was one more. Oh, that's right, academics. Australia's pretty much gone. It's gone. I said this with Ben and them the other week. If we do not have something in the next election where we can push back on this, I think Australia's in all sorts of trouble. If Albo wins the next election, which is 28, he'll have 3 years, so we'll be getting to 30. There's less than 20 years before we have a 10% Islamic population in this country. And don't forget, you're also going to have with that all the radical Marxists that we've got with the Greens and we've got the biggest bureaucracy per head of population on the planet. We've got more people on the public tee than in any other country on the world. So they're always going to lean left and vote left. So we're going to have the crazy combinations of the crazy leftists, which unfortunately in the leftist group there's more crazy leftists than sensible leftists. So you're going to have them combining in with the 10% Islamic population. And then you got the Greens, obviously, voters, which does my head in. So us poor conservatives are really going to be in for a real problem if we don't address it. My concern is it too late? Have we got to a point beyond being able to address it? Now, I discussed this today. I'm doing it twice because I think it's important. Scott Challen and Ben and a bunch of others, they talk about remigration. I can understand the thought behind it, but every politician or every lobby group that puts up a certain policy, there's the thought behind it and then there's the realities behind it. So, and this is why I want to get Scott on. And Scott's agreed he will come on. He just had to get through his rally on the weekend. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. And I hope Scott hears this, because then he can prepare for it. Because he talks about there's 2 million people here not on permanent visas or not on visas at all, and we can get rid of them. Great. I think there should be laws that should be put in. For example, if we have got people who aren't citizens but that sit in our jail, how do we get them out of the country? You come to this country and you're not an Australian citizen and you commit a crime, why are you sitting in an Australian jail? Why is the taxpayer funding you? If that's the case and someone brought this up, then good, deport them. But there's going to be, out of those 2 million, how many are we going to be able to legitimately deport? Now, you can get ruthless, but remember, it's all right to say remigration, but you've got to win an election. So you've got to get enough seats to be able to pass legislation in the lower house. But then you've also got to have enough people, enough seats in the upper house, the Senate, to rubber stamp and not dilute that legislation to get the legislation you want to deport people out of the country. And I can guarantee you, once you start deporting, guaranteed in our current setup, those people that whoever's going to do it, the Australian Federal Police, ASIO, maybe another department, whatever you're going to do, once they're up for being deported, there's going to be a bunch of lawyers that are going to come in and fight those deportations. It's going to go to the courts and it's going to be stuck in there for years. So, and that's, a lot of that happened under, remember the border closures with Howard and Abbott when they shut the borders and people were there and they're having legal fights, and you had all the woke leftists going in and they volunteered to legally represent them and get it into court, and basically cost the taxpayers millions, probably hundreds of millions, to fight those cases. And there was that famous case, I think there was a South Australian family who ended up winning in the court and ended up staying. We've got now the ISIS brides coming in. So there's a massive fight to get there. And even if you're successful, how many of those 2 million people not on visas are in the process of getting a visa? How many of them are legitimate immigrants that can complement what we're doing as a country? You might have a young family whose parents are Australian citizens, but their grandparents were, say, in Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, and let's say they're a Christian family. They want to get them away from, the strict Islamic faiths in those countries. And they want to bring, their parents have got here, but they haven't quite yet got their Australian citizenship. Are we talking about sending them back? I think it's a simple thing to say we've got to send them all back. I don't think you're going to, I think the way you structure this debate and the way you're going to win it, you can't be that forceful, if that's the word for it. That's where I got concerns. And I echoed this last week with Ben in our debate. I mean, he went, I think, too far. To win a political debate, you've got to bring enough people with you to win it. If you're going to go so far, I don't think the majority of Australians are going to accept it. And that's what you've got to think. How do you win this debate? How do you get a immigration policy that can push back against what I've just shown you, that can win the debate politically, get you enough people in Parliament, both lower and upper house, to pass through legislation to get the process happening? That's your first step, and that's a big bloody step. Huge step. And yet, what are we focused on? Avi Yemeni, I like you, mate, but you're probably not going to like what I'm about to say. What we're focused on is gimmicks. Avi's come out and he's trying to start there, which I like Avi. I reckon Avi's a good guy. A lot of people will hate me for saying that. I think Avi's a good guy. But this gimmick he's got from Monica Bloody Smith about doing an ALP and starting this Free Palestine party just so he can push preferences to certain people, I don't like it. I think it's a gimmick. We got so many big problems. What Scott's doing, where he's trying to lobby politicians, and with Sam Bamford, they're talking to politicians and really putting effort in there to try and change the narrative. Now, me and Scott got in, not a big thing. He said they've started the conversation. I think this immigration conversation has been going on since the Tampa incident, which many of the younger generations wouldn't even remember. Now, that Scott was right to point out that was about borders, but it also in the mainstream community, not in our politicians. We've been taught this immigration debate's been going on for years. It's been going on for years. Under Howard, that silly woman, Amanda Vanstone, brought in, and this is what started the Cronulla riots, a lot of the Lebanese troublemakers. So she was really the first one that started allowing a lot of the Sudanese gangs, people from war-torn countries, to come to our shores, which was always a bloody mistake. You can have your refugee status and bring people who are at risk of impending violence, but they've still got to complement what we're doing. It'll be a very tough decision, but you have to vet these people and get the right mix into our country. We've gone from vetting people and getting the right mix to letting anybody in. We're about to let the ISIS brides come back into Australia. That should never have been allowed to happen. But Albert, here's the gates. Open them up. So going back to Avi and his thing, really is this what our democracies we've fallen to? We've got to start these silly gimmicks. I mean, everyone with a brain sees through that. The ALP will see through that. Their strategists will see through that. They will let all their people know not to vote for that group on it. And all of our energy goes into stupidity. Sorry, Avi. I just think this is a stupid stunt. I'll be interested. I'll get onto it. And Avi, anytime you want to come in and discuss this with me, feel free. But I'm just wondering too, people who sign up for this party, do they have to pay? If they are paying, where's the money going to? Is it going to the AEC or is it going to some fund? Yeah, there's got to be these questions. And I'm getting a little sick. And people, of course, talk about people who grift. And Avi, this might hit close to home. I'm sorry if it does, mate, because this is not just aimed at you. It's aimed at a bunch of people on the internet. Is they get themselves into these campaigns or these conflicts and they either got to go to court or they're taking people to court and they ask for people to donate. And, this is what they call a grift. And I'm not saying you're guilty of this, Avi, if you do listen to this, but I think you've got to be very clear on where the funds are going to and that you get a refund if it doesn't work out. So I don't know whether you're charging or not. I'll actually try and jump on. But Avi's always, Rukshan even, is more than welcome to come on here. The other part, which again, I don't think Avi will like to see, is I think sometimes you've got to be smart and take a back seat. Okay? For the sake of the country, take a back seat. Now, Pauline's on a ride right now. But every time I'm looking at a press conference or whatever with Pauline, Avi's right there. And Avi's not there to be a journalist. Avi's there to be a cheerleader for Pauline and One Nation. Now, a lot of people say, that's a good thing. No, because it's going to reinforce doubts in those people that are considering to vote for Pauline Hanson and One Nation. They're going to see Avi there, and while Avi's got a lot of supporters, he's also got a lot of detractors. And when they watch the potential that Avi is there as a cheerleader, they go, no, this is bullshit. It will put doubt in their minds. And I know that because I talk to people every day that have doubts about One Nation, and I'm trying to convince them that One Nation is the way to go. And I can tell you now, some people will say, yeah, but Avi's in a corner. Sorry, Avi, that's just a fact of life. So while I think Avi does a lot of good, I'm not too sure. And there's Avi, there's Mike, they're all latching themselves to the One Nation thing. Seriously, and I want One Nation to win. This is why I'm saying this. I'm not too sure that's a good thing. If you disagree, fine, that's fine. We're all entitled to our opinions. Like I said, I like Avi, got a lot of respect for what he does. I'll get a lot of hate for that. And now when I say I don't think Avi should be doing, I'll get a lot of hate from people who agree with Avi. My point is, I'm on one side. That's Australia. That's our country. That's our culture, our heritage. And we've got to get on the right, and this is the interesting thing out of our conversation last week with me, Ben, Daniel, whatever. We all are conservatives, pretty much. We all agreed on a lot of things. We all agreed that mass immigration wasn't the way to go. We all agreed that our foreign debt was a real problem. We all agreed that housing is an issue. There was a bunch of areas that were fertile for agreement. But then we can't come together because no one's willing. Maybe, actually, there's those on the extremes that aren't willing to come together and say, well, listen, this is our common ground. We've got to give away a little bit of our extreme part to get to a part where we can bring the whole centre right together so we can explode this ideology coming out of the left about opening up the gates and mass immigration. So, for example, Scott may have to say he wants negative immigration. So he wants to be stopping immigration and then kicking people out. So he wants our numbers to go down. I understand that. But politically, is it realistically something we can achieve? I would argue that would be a very difficult hurdle to jump. Could we reduce immigration dramatically and put parameters around it to ensure that it embeds itself, assimilates into our culture and heritage? No, I think that's far more achievable. So, sometimes politics is compromise. What can you give up to ultimately get what you want? Now, Scott could be having that in his head. Scott's a very smart man. He might be saying, we want negative immigration, and this is always a thing. Always reach for the moon, because when you negotiate then and you come back, you ultimately get what you want. So maybe that could be what Scott's doing. And he's a smart guy. I wouldn't be surprised if that could be what he's doing. But in doing that, actually, are you torpedoing and sabotaging your ability to win enough votes, to win enough seats in both houses of parliament to push through that legislation you so desperately need? Because if we have a conservative government, but the Greens and ALP are still in control of the Senate, you're going nowhere. That's what Abbott faced. That's why he couldn't get anything through. So we have to win as a conservative group. And that's whether you're One Nation. And listen, I know Angus Taylor's getting his stuff, but he and Matt Canavan are trying. Matt Canavan was at what do they call it, Australia Marches rally with Scott on the weekend, and I thought he spoke well. Now, is he going to give everything that what everyone wants? No. But at least now we have got, and this is where I do agree with Scott, he has got the politicians, and particularly give Pauline Hanson credit on this, they've got them now talking about immigration and changing their stance. Now, we shouldn't be criticising them for that. We should be encouraging them to change for that. If we don't, we are going to end up with that 10%, and we're going to end up with those 4,000 lawyers, the media, the movie makers, the academics, and the politicians infesting our institutions. Is that what we want? For me, no. And that's not assimilation, that's takeover. That's an absolute takeover. So if an Islamic family, a Muslim family wants to this country, come into this country, as many of them have done, and they want to assimilate into our way of life, and they're going to become real productive people into that way of life, okay, no problems. But when it's open like this guy, and they're going to use their mosque, and remember, they're more devoted to their faith than us, then we're in trouble. Now, there's one other way you can beat it, and that is for Australians to get back to church and Christianity. And I'm talking a real church, real faith. And I don't even care if you're an atheist or you've given up on the church or whatever. We've got to get the other, just like the Muslims have their mosque and they have their committees. Churches are always looking. I can tell you now, churches are always looking for people to get involved and help out. So if you put a proposal like that guy's done through the mosque, through the churches, about getting some Christian kids and getting scholarships done, it's been going on for hundreds of years, into those same areas, you can push back. Get some legitimate Christians, get some legitimate Catholics. You know, how many churches do we have in this country, whether they're Anglican, whether they're Catholic, whether they're Christian? And if every one of those churches actually produced one young person in each of those areas, we'd dominate. I don't know whether Christian Australians have got that in them. I don't know whether everyday Australians have got that in them. But if we did that, we keep our country. Now, even if you're not a Christian, even if you don't want to go down there, is keeping a country, keeping a heritage important enough for you to get back to church? Because if it's not, by 2050, there's another group, and let's say the Islamic community are determined enough to do that, and our way of life will change forever. Your kids' way of life will change forever. So if you can't take what they're telling you to, in fact, this is not me telling you. This is that guy that you just listened to inside a mosque preaching to his congregation, whatever you want to call it, and telling him exactly what their plans are. It's there right in front of your face. But Albo doesn't care. Chris Bowen doesn't care. Tony Burke definitely doesn't care. They don't care about our heritage. They would happily... How much money is the Albo government now given to Islamic communities? And normally, again, this is the hard part. This is where you get tested as an individual that you're not a hypocrite. You know, we want our governments to be able to give to legitimate community-based organisations. So whether they're churches, sporting groups, whatever. But we don't want those organisations... I don't think, for example, the Catholic Church is looking at any takeover of Australia at any stage. You know, they helped build Australia. So we are under, whether you like it or not, a bit of threat. Some people say, well, World War III has already started. When you listen to that, you can understand what they're talking about. If we can't push back that in a politically democratic way, what comes next? That's the scary part. So, Harvey, I haven't had a crack. I've just made some facts. Anytime you want to come on and you can spruik your free Palestine thing, I think that's silly. I think there's enough ammunition there now, like I've just done, to really push back to get people on board. Now, we have to keep finding ways of getting our people good. So that guy in America for CARE, he is pushing his community, his faith. So on that part, if we just focus on that, well, good on him. Why can't we do the same? If we're incapable of doing the same, do we deserve to lose our country? People talk about fighting wars. This is a different war. So I can't wait to have this conversation with Scott. I would love to have this conversation with Avi. So Avi Yemeni, if you're out there and you want to come on, mate, anytime. I know you do your podcast on a Tuesday night. Happy to do a special event podcast. Bring Rukshan along if you like. That'll get me some more hate. Like I said, I'm willing to talk to anyone. I've got a lot of respect for those guys. But on two fronts, I think doing these stunts don't help. I'm very worried it'll backfire like the Marbles video did, in my opinion. And I'm not too sure Avi latching himself to One Nation in those press conferences is a good thing. I don't think it's a good look. But that's just me. I'll leave that up to One Nation. I'm backing them. I hope they get in. We need them to get in. The polls are looking okay. Honestly, I'd like to see some merger on the Conservative side. I'd like to see the Conservatives and the Liberals, Nationals and One Nation come and create a true Conservative force. If they combined and you could get a real leader behind that, whether that's Pauline or someone else, I don't think there's a political force in Australia that could stop it. But right now, we're at the same thing again. The vote's going to get diluted between One Nation and the LNP. We need a Menzies to come out from behind the shadows. I don't know who that person is, but we've got, personally, we just need to get the Conservative side together. And we need some egos put aside, but I don't think that's ever going to happen. So anyway, there's a lot of problems out there. We've got to find some solutions, hence why we have this podcast. So I decided to dedicate that to all tonight, so rather than policy. Anyway, let's have a bit of fun. Let's get into our X's. Let's have a bit of a look at it. Whoops. That was that guy's opinion, not mine. Let's see what we've got on our X feed. Football. In my opinion, it's not a hell yeah, it's a definite no. Razor Ray Chamberlain runs through his... Oh, I've got to look at this. If you're an AFL fan, I'm a Richmond supporter, and mate, this was crazy on the weekend. Rubbish. Trying to break a tackle. That's what he just said before. It was not a prior opportunity. This is where in the AFL it's confusing. Nonsense. I'm gonna have to watch that episode. If you're an AFL supporter, especially like me, a Richmond supporter, it's a bit crazy. It's time to end the division. Welcome to country isn't unity. It's institutionalised grievance that tells 97% of Aussies they're perpetual aggressors. All it delivers is, well, we all agree on that. That goes for 4 minutes, so I'm not going to go there. She hung up on a Prime Minister, won Queensland the Olympics, and ran a state during a pandemic. Anastasia Palaszczuk reflected on the hate and heartbreak of being the longest-serving female Oh, here we go. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. We can reveal the man who booed the welcome. Oh, let's have a listen. This is only a minute 52. That's interesting. I have a different view on the whole. I don't agree with welcome to country. I think it should be gone, out, whatever. I think you can make that argument, but I don't think you should disrupt Anzac Day services. And sorry, he's a grown man living with his parents. Get out of home, get a job. Sorry, I'm not going to agree with the Nazi, and he obviously is. So I will agree with him about welcome to country. I will agree with him about his right to speak, but not during a ceremony. I mean, that whether you agree with welcome to country or not, and there'll be people who push back on me on this, an Anzac Day ceremony is not the place to do it. And I don't think it should be anywhere near an Anzac Day ceremony. Go to the football. Go to the Anzac Day footy match and boo there. The problem is you're going to get 90,000 other people stand up and applaud. And the problem that these guys are doing is they're actually going to make it harder, and I'm not too sure they care, they're going to make it harder for us to get welcome to country removed, because now a lot of people are just going to dig their heels in. And you heard that at the footy where when the welcome to country was completed, they stood up and applauded. Everybody in that stadium pretty much applauded. And obviously there would have been a few there that weren't. If I was there, I wouldn't have applauded. I'm not going to applaud or welcome the country. I don't agree with it, but I also don't agree. This was a whole setup. This is what I don't get about, the police and the authorities. If they're looking over the media for hate speech laws, for example, which again I disagree with, there was a bunch of people in the build-up to Anzac Day that were promoting this. So where were the authorities? Geez, I hope I shared that. I may not have. Anyway, I hope you heard it in the background. Did I share it? I'm sure I shared it. Sorry, guys. Anyway, if I didn't, we got more to get through. I'll get back on there. I thought I shared. See if I can share it again. I'm not going to share that article again, but all right. Sorry, guys, I may not have shared. Let's see if I can get my ugly face up on the screen. Other way. That's probably better. All right, let's keep going. So that's my opinion on it. And all you're doing, if you're really against the welcome to country, these stunts, and they are stunts. So what I was saying before is in the build-up to it, there was a number of people with NSN connections, March for Australia connections, that were encouraging people to boo the welcome to country. I knew before Anzac Day that this was going to happen. Now, if I'm just a nobody. If I knew that, why didn't authorities know that? Anyway, not that I agree with that, by the way, but there is a time and a place, and I don't think the time in there is a thing. Why is the US... Washington drives Syria deal to return Australian brides. The US has intervened to secure the imminent departure of 4 Australian ISIS brides and their 9 children from Syria, with the Iran ceasefire creating a brief window for their removal. Interesting. Haven't heard about that. She had the story and it didn't show away. Oh, yeah, Ross Lyon. If you're following the... let's have a quick listen.
The story in relation to Ross Lyon and some insensitive comments that offended some of the Indigenous players at St Kilda Football Club, which you addressed last night, and we heard from Ross. He was stopped by the cameras today on arrival at St Kilda training.
That was an accurate story, and where culture is really important and behaviour is really important, and I made an error unintentionally. She had the story and I didn't shy away from it, and everything's accurate. Well, you have to talk to the players, but I'm really thankful for their support. In particular, post the story, they're really powerful social media reports. Have you checked that?
What he's referring to there, and his support on social media, Nasai Wanganeen Miller are also on social media. We're seeing that there. That was then reshared by Nasai as well. So clearly...
Brad and Nasai, I never said you didn't love Ross.
No,
I just said you were disappointed with some comments he made.
But the way that Ross has handled it has almost been textbook, would you say?
I think the way they've all handled it has been. I know that Ross would be disappointed and others at St Kilda would be disappointed that the story became public. However, once it did, Ross felt it was good in a way because he'd rather come out and come clean than have some sort of shadowy rumours lurking. I know that Bradley Hill used to play with you at Hawthorn.
Yep.
And Bradley Hill experienced things at Hawthorn that he didn't like. And I remember talking to Cyril Rioli about some stuff that happened at Hawthorn. And I'm not terrible.
She's a windbag. She's a total windbag. And while that's a sports story, it's also an example of a woke Australia. I said something to 3 Indigenous boys that they took offence to. And they did the right thing. They went behind closed doors. They had a discussion. They, like what we used to do in the day, we'd go to a bar, you'd have a beer, you'd sort it out, and you'd move on, which is what they did. But no, Caro's got to publicise it. The story gets out to her little things, and she's got to bring it, and then she sits on a pedestal and she judges everyone, even though she's got no right to judge anybody. But away she goes, and she starts judging. And the line you get now, it's not a matter, you hear this all the time now. Gary Lyon put it through the other day. It's not a matter of what you express. It's a matter of how it's taken at the other end. So what they're trying to say, if they get offended, you're not allowed to express it. That's the antithesis of free speech. Free speech is I can say whatever I want, like that guy just said. We can call him out for being a dickhead at the Anzac ceremony, but in the end he's right. He has he doesn't in this country, but in other countries he does. You have the right to say what you like. Now, we also have the right to call him a dickhead, which I've just done. these three guys took offence to something fairly innocent that Ross Lyon said as a coach. Now, the line is going, well, they were offended, so he's got no right to say it. Well, how can you jump inside the minds of somebody to see whether they're going to be offended by something you say or not? You know, if you say, and I've been in this position as a sports coach before, if you say something that offends somebody and they raise that to you, easy. Do what Ross did, apologise. I've had to do that. Now, it doesn't mean I should be vilified for saying it. If I can justify what I say and how I said it, and I can make that argument about it, then that's my right to have that say. And someone could get offended by what I say, but if I think they shouldn't have got offended, I've got the right to stand by what I've said. Nowadays, it's automatic. If you've offended somebody, you must apologise, even if what you said wasn't offensive. It's nuts. We're in a crazy, crazy world, and that is nuts. Let's move on. Oh, here what she's got. Deranged Green Senator Sarah Young says one nation lied about loving a country that is multicultural. They wish it was different. I think about 85% wish it was different. Very appropriate. This needs a full-scale review. Something, okay. That's my Tigers with their injury. Zuby, why? This is why the terms people of colour and white privilege are very stupid and divisive. And then that goes for 11 minutes. I'll listen to that maybe. I'm going to listen to that later on. Add to folder. If you haven't got Book Premier, this is what you should get. You can save all this stuff. See, I've got politics, fitness. There's my podcast, so I'll put it in there. Restore Britain has pledged to offer thousands of veteran jobs in... I love that. That might be my policy. Restore Britain is a pledge to offer thousands of veterans jobs in immigration enforcement. So that goes back to what I was saying a little bit with Scott Challen. You know, how are you going to enforce this? Maybe you have a new division, but whatever. A Restore Britain government will immediately run a fast-track recruitment campaign to bring thousands and thousands of British military veterans into immigration enforcement roles. Field roles. This is brilliant news. Restore Britain would not neglect their veterans like they have been for so long by our incompetent governments. I love that idea. I'm going to steal it. That is a great idea. And maybe some of those SAS guys and military people that are looking to get out of our military because of all these bloody being thrown under the bus by lawfare, they can go into something like that. This is short. The danger of white liberal women. Let's have a listen to this. This could be good.
Diversity and tolerance and posting about it on Instagram. Who's voting for mass immigration? White liberal women. Living safely behind the walls of their upper-class suburbs and gated communities, these women love preaching diversity and tolerance and posting about it on Instagram, all while never having to tolerate any diversity in their actual lives. They don't ride the trains packed with groping migrants. Their daughters will never walk through no-go zones in low-income cities. Their neighborhoods stay completely undiverse. Meanwhile, working-class women and their kids get raped, stabbed, and terrorized by the very third-world foreigners they voted in because they wanted to be nice. This isn't kindness, it's suicidal empathy. It's misplaced feeling that is currently destroying our civilization. Women are designed to be nurturing, and unfortunately, they can't separate their biology from their voting patterns. The stats are clear. Women are heavily in favor of open borders, welfare expansion, and feel-good policies that ignore risks. Ultimately, women's unchecked empathy has become a weapon used against their own people. They are literally loving the dopamine hit of being kind more than their nation's safety and survival. And that's why women's voting was a mistake. It applies kindness where protection is needed, and love where justice is required, and softness where harshness is necessary. Women are not designed to lead nations or to shape public policy, and until we recover that basic truth, we will continue to see the disastrous consequences of feminized governance. Who's voting?
Well, that's interesting. There are strong conservative women too. I don't know whether I agree with that entirely. I do agree with 75% of it, but that last bit, no. I've never been a big advocate for taking away women's vote. I think that's wrong. I know a lot of strong conservative women, and I know a lot of left-leaning men who are dickheads. So, he ruined that clip at the end. But liberal women, yeah, a lot of what he said about liberal women was very true, but it doesn't apply to conservative women. I think people have got to get away from the broad strokes, and I'm probably guilty of that sometimes. I don't want to read that. Interview with future PM Comrade Albanese. Comrade Albanese, monthly review. When was this? May 2018, an independent socialist magazine. Is this true? Comrade with Rob's usually pretty good. Interview with future PM Comrade Albanese. His future plan to turn Australia into a communist state. Retaining power by employing his voters as public servants, job for the boys. Importing new voters to secure the base. Nationalising your wallet, one tax at a time. Revolution by red tape and dependency. Wonder if this is a legit... Can't be. Is it, Rob? I don't know. My blood pressure is through the roof with this. Ever Australia? I'll be surprised if that's... And I'm happy to be proven wrong if that is actually a legitimate headline, but who knows? Footy, you just want terrorists. Breaking, Tony Burke says immigrants coming to Australia don't need to. You just want terrorists living here. You are nothing but a wanker. Won't disagree with that. What else have we got? Here's Melinda's great. A bloated public service means more legislation, more rules, more red tape, more standards, more regulations, more people needed to enforce them, harder to get anything done, more money wasted, more government control. Let's have a look. So this is a libertarian document. I'll see if I can expand that. Open image in new tape. Share this tab instead. And let's see. Yeah, we can. So I'll double check you got that. I'll give it a full screen. Just bear with me for a tick. Okay, that's better. This is where I was saying before Australia's at. Where is it? If you look there, Australia. So Australia is the most bloated government bureaucracy in the world. Public sector workers per 1,000 people select the country with over 5 million. And Australia, look how far ahead we are. 125 to 150 people per 1,000 are public servants. Israel, that's surprising, is the next highest. Britain, not so surprising because they've got a hardcore trade union. But look how it drops off. France, Spain, United States, Brazil, Argentina with Javier Milei. And look at some of these countries. It really drops off. So the yellow line is where we were in 2008. So that yellow dot and the blue dot is how it's increased. We're already. So this is just not long after Rudd took power. We're already leading the globe. And look at these other countries. Is anyone going backwards? Egypt. Yes. So Egypt from 2008 is going backwards. Argentina, is that right? So that's the 2008 total, and that's interesting. I thought Argentina was decreasing their bureaucracy. So if you go from yellow to blue, you've increased. If you go from blue to yellow, you've decreased. So that was the figure in 2008. This is the figure in 2023. So God knows what we are now. Iran. They've gone backwards in their bureaucracy. They've reduced it, probably killed them all. And all those countries here have, look at this. Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, a lot of the Islamic countries, they've all gone backwards. And they've got the right idea. They probably hung the bastards. Spain's gone backwards. Or no, they've gone up. Sorry, take that back. So that's interesting. But look at that. We're up to nearly 150 bureaucrats per 1,000. What is a bloated government? Let's read it. We'll finish on this one, I think. Bloated administration refers to a government or organisational structure that has become excessively large, inefficient and costly, often with overlapping responsibilities, unnecessary bureaucratic layers and slow decision-making processes. That's definitely us. It causes typical it causes typically include decades of incremental policy expansion, over-regulation and compliance burdens, and the growth of administrative staff to manage programs rather than to deliver results. Hear, hear. Political incentives also contribute. Governments often create new departments, agencies or programs to signal action or satisfy special interest, such as our First Nations ambassador. God's sakes, what a waste that's been. Rather than to meet measurable public needs. Over time, this accumulation results in a cumbersome system that consumes disproportionate resources, stifles innovation, slows service delivery, and imposes high cost on taxpayers and businesses. According to the ABS, as of June 2024, there were 2,517,900 public sector employees. This equates to approximately 9.4% of the population being employed in the public sector. Well, we're at that magic 10% nearly, aren't we, of what we were talking about before. So whether it's public sector employees or is that Islamic population, either way, we are being taken over. And as a person who's run his own businesses and never been in a public job, I'd say that's a disgrace. Great place for us to leave off. That'll do me for one night. Big D&M on some ideas and policies and strategy and whatever you want to call it, politics. So hopefully I didn't go too D&M on you. But from me, from my boy JJ, here it comes to say goodbye. Come on, mate. Come on, big stretch. From me, JJ, God bless your kids. God bless your grandkids. God bless your pets. God bless this country. We got to fight back for it. Looking forward to some future guests. We'll get a few on. That last one's the Libertarians. I'm trying. I'm going to be doing it this week to get David Limbrick and my good mate Jordan Ditloff to come on to discuss a new policy that would address that over-bloated bureaucracy. Let's hope we can do that in the next few weeks. Until then, I'll see you the next time. All right.